birthdays, you know what it is, but for the bigger public, I want to keep a happy home. You know what I mean? So we're not going to get into what it is, but it's a milestone birthday. So I want to make it special, but at the same time, you kind of know like requests are going to be different from what you would do. And, you know, you feel like, what, really? I thought I was done. I got to go here too. And so just, you know, ready to have fun and be around folks that I got a lot of love for and just enjoy myself. So I know she's going to, you know, love it. And there's some cool little surprises in there. So it'll be good.
Excellent. So is today her actual birthday?
No, it's on Sunday.
Oh, so you get to celebrate twice.
Well, listen, that sounds like a benefit. That sounds like a benefit for her, you know what I mean? But no, I think what it was is that the DJ, she had a specific DJ that she wanted, and that person was available today. So from a long time ago, we booked the DJ, and we were going to fit it. Plus Friday, you know, party, people can recover. You know, we old now. We drink a little too much of that brown liquor, and, you know.
Collin, we are not old. We are seasoned,
yes,
my friend.
well seasoned. Sazone, adobo, all of it.
Right. And I can't wait for that because I know that DJ. And so I am so excited to, to show up with my two-step. I'll have my hubby with me, so it is all good. But you're good. All is good. You'll be with us for the duration of keeping it 100, which is super exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that somewhere in my like peripheral, when it starts hitting, if it starts hitting too close to 5 o'clock, I'll feel the glare of let's go. but I'm with y'all already. I'm locked in. The one thing I did want to say on a serious note, because I feel like it's been everywhere the last 2 weeks, but it was after our last show, is slavery did not benefit Black people. For the people in the back, slavery did not benefit Black people. Don't believe the hype. Truth is truth. We just live by truth. Keep it 100.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. No, I appreciate that call out, because while we talk about career and we have flavorful conversations here, the reason why these conversations are so important is because we do recognize the history, the real history. And so whether it was hundreds of years ago, that still carries into and affects folks today, we're still dealing with the ramifications and the implications of all of that. So thank you for that call out. And before we, kind of dig into and introduce our amazing guests, let me just kind of sprinkle our conversation as well, our intro here, and sharing with you. There's some excitement on my end as well, not only because I'm going to get to see you in person tonight, but because your girl is headed to Europe next week. And so I've never been to Europe. I'm very blessed that I still have both of my parents with me, who turn 80 this year. And so we are celebrating life. We are celebrating family. And 5 of us, me, my husband, my daughter, and my parents, are heading out on a 2-week European cruise, and hopefully we all come back friends.
Yeah, that's a good amount of time. That's a good amount of time to test the relationships.
I know. So between what I've got going on and you also have a vacation, we'll talk a little bit about what that's going to do to the show during the month of August, but we'll get to that, as we get ready to wrap up. But I think we are so ready to get into it. And what do you think, Collin?
Let's go.
Should we get the show started?
Nope.
Let's go. Hey friends, welcome to Keeping It 100 Career Conversations. Now you already know, not all career conversations are created equal. If you're a flavorful professional looking to decode that workplace and accelerate your career roadmap, let's go ahead and let's get right into it with your hosts, Adriana Dawson and Collin Bailey. That's right, folks. Welcome. And happy Friday from your girl, Adriana, and Collin Bailey. We are so excited to have you join us today. Shout out to all the folks popping in the comments. Keep showing love. Thank you for spending time with us today. Remember, no gatekeeping here, folks. So let your network know that you are on Keeping It 100 Career Conversations with Adriana and Collin, so we can get more, sort of goodness and energy, in these chats. And if there's something in particular that resonates with you, or, something that you want to call out, please let us know, but keep showing us love in the comments. Hey, everyone. And so today, we've got the one, the only, Randy Martinez. Randy Martinez, welcome to Keeping It 100.
Let me take a.
Hey, Randy, what's going on?
It's going. Let me take a sip of water real quick.
I see. I see the product placement.
You go ahead and that was a great segue because, folks, Randy Martinez is the Chief Equity Officer for Pizza Hut. And so we have the honor, and he is honoring us today with not only his career origin story, but lots of tips, tricks, and insights. And so before I kick it off to Collin, because I know Collin needs to sprinkle some of his, story and work history with Randy. Randy, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for how long?
Like 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, for a minute. I think we were both young whippersnappers. And so it's been an absolute pleasure seeing Randy's career just kind of take off and the impact that he has had in multiple communities, leading national initiatives. And he's going to get more into that career journey. But Collin, your thoughts about our guest today?
No, nothing but love. So we had the pleasure of working together. Sometimes we'd say, should we just say previous employer, or are we going to give the name? But we worked together at a very large corporation, and we end up seeing each other for the first time at one of these kind of social events for minority professionals. And it was great to meet someone who was very real, down to earth, but polished at the same time. And I knew Randy was going to continue doing big things and doing great things. And he was pretty much covering half the country by the time, I left and moved to a different place. But it's always been love. In fact, Randy, I'm pretty sure you're the one who recommended me for the board for City Year Providence. And it's been a great organization and very meaningful to me, and so a lot of love, and we need to grab a drink sometime soon, even though you moved a little bit out on the water. I can drink on the water too. I can't swim on the water, but I can drink on the water. Okay.
You don't need to swim.
So Randy, let's get into it. We got the Hounds here who have joined you, which is an amazing professional community who's shown a lot of love and support. We got our girl Raquel Flores. We've got folks who have been joining us consistently. We've got Dr. Janet Ray. Mike, what's going on, Mike? And then we've got some new folks who are joining us. So why don't you share some of your goodness with us and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, awesome. Well, first, guys, congratulations. I mean, this is awesome, right? People always talk about, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to do this. You guys did it. And you know what? You're doing it for, what you're doing to have people tell their stories for, the younger generation who's trying to navigate and figure out how to work through their careers is huge, right? Because we didn't have that. I didn't have that. And so I applaud you for that and for actually, taking the action to make that happen. So thank you. And then thanks for the invite, guys. I appreciate it. Your intro is funny because I don't think about it that way. It's hey man, I've been on a hustle for 53 years. Let's just call it what it is, right? Yeah. But I want to tell you, I want to open up and tell you about my early life before I started my career, because I think my early life is what really the traumas, I guess if I can call it that, of what was being me as a Latino, because it was a trauma, right? When kids call you names and they pick at your identity. And then just other things that happened before I even turned 20, before I even started my career. You know, you start life with a handicap, and it was rough. My family, look, my mom is from Nicaragua. She came here at 3. My biological father, who I never met, is from El Salvador. I was born in LA. Spanish was my first language. I didn't really speak English until 5th grade, where and I'll tell you that story in a minute. My father, who raised me, was an Air Force officer that my mom married when I was 6, who through that life, I was able to see the country, right? I was born in LA, Southern Cal, moved to Wyoming, moved back to Central California at Vandenberg Air Force Base, where he launched missiles. He taught philosophy at the Air Force Academy, so I moved to Colorado. He went to Air War College and lived in Alabama, moved to Virginia, lived in DC. Now I live in Rhode Island, and I'm half the time in Plano, Texas. So I'm kind of a Texan. I'm learning how to use the word y'all a little bit.
Why can you hear that?
I'm working through that. So that was my life, right? And I was the first one to actually go to college and get a graduate degree. From my mom's side of the family, and from what I understand, my biological father's side of the family. And so that was my life. Like, I grew up not speaking English because I was born to a 16-year-old mom. My mom was 16 when she had me. I mean, who gives a 16-year-old the playbook on how to raise a kid, right? And so I lived with my grandmother, who only spoke Spanish, and that's where that's why when my mom got married and I was 6 years old and we moved to Wyoming, everyone was different, and I was different for them. And I'm 53 years old, and back in the day in elementary school, they used to have a program for special ed kids. I think they used to call it special ed.
Yeah, they used to call it special ed. Yep.
And they used to pull me out of class regularly to work with me on this system called Mr. Merlin, where it would teach me how to words in English. And so that's what it was like, early on in elementary school. We started to move around. I am thankful for my life in the military because it gave me an opportunity to, just, hey, I'm not embarrassed to walk up to anybody and say, hey, I'm Randy. Who are you? Like, what's your name? Right. Like, because that's how you survive going from city to city, moving around as much as I did. And so, and then my little sister, who I loved to death, was kind of my sidekick. She's 7 years younger than me. And she'd come with me to like mini marts and, where the kids would hang out in school. And I'm just like, just be here with me. Just, I'm going to meet people and, and that kid, fortunately, after, but that was how I grew up. And, one of the things that I remember about growing up early on was being called names because of who I was. In the US, they would call me things like beaner, spick, wetback, go back to Mexico, you don't belong here. And when I would go to Nicaragua, they were like, Yankee, go back. Like, go to, and like, man, this is tough. And then fast forward, I literally didn't graduate high school. I failed my literature course in high school. And it was a girlfriend who I dated who called my professor and said, Randy needs to move with his family to DC this summer. Please let him just pass. He can't stay here for summer school. And I'll never forget calling him to ask him if I passed. And he was very cold and said, passed, and hung up the phone. But I literally didn't graduate high school because of an English course. And I get to Virginia, and I end up getting cancer 6 months, into us living there. And you fast forward a couple of years, and it came back. I dealt with it twice. And so by the time I'm 20, 21, I've been ill. I've gone through an identity crisis. I don't know what I want to do with my life. I literally failed out of high school. I'm going to the community college at this point. And my parents are going through a horrible divorce. But I had dreams, right? I always thought really big. And, where that came from, I don't know. What I will tell you is my mom, just to sidebar a little bit, my mom was what you would say, I don't want to say a typical Latina, but, she was like, things were never good enough, right? You get to 100%, and she would say, yeah, can you do better? And it wasn't, can you do better? She was tough. Like, it's not good enough. And so that's just the way it was. So I start my career. I finally, graduate college after going through a couple different schools, community college, and trying to work my way through. And I start my career working for a nonprofit organization called the National Association of Hispanic Publications. The way I got that job is crazy, and that we could spend an entire hour talking about that. But long story short, I went home on a rainy day, walked like 2 miles from where the bus dropped me off on a cold January day. And I started calling all these these Latino national organizations. And I'm like, hi, I'm Randy Martinez. I just graduated college today. And I can come work for you. And they would say, well, you need to apply, you need to go through this process, etc. And I ended up calling this organization who I'd interviewed with before. And the gentleman answered the phone, and he said, hey, when can you start? Yeah, I need help. We're putting a conference together. And I said, I can start now. And he goes, it's raining outside. Why don't you come in tomorrow? And the rain turned into snow that overnight. And I remember my mom dropping me off at the metro station in DC, and I took it in, etc. And I'll never forget having holes in my shoes and walking through the slush and the water getting into my shoes. And I go there, and the building sat in between Rhode Island Avenue in Massachusetts along Connecticut Avenue. Who would have ever known that this would become my home one day? New England, right?
Look at that.
And I start working, and my first project is to bring Bill Clinton into the National Press Club to work with the Secret Service to get Social Security numbers for the attendees of this conference. And it's the first time, I saw Bill Clinton speak, like literally 10 feet away. And it changed my life. And so I threw myself into the nonprofit world, into lobbying, into the political world. And that's what the next 13 years would be for me. I would run nonprofit organizations. I would advocate. I became a lobbyist on social and business issues. I had some cool jobs there, man. Like I worked for one organization called Finca International. They provided micro lending to poor women around the world with a 99% return rate for, and it was just a village banking program. You give somebody $50, convert it to 100, they would convert it to 150, 200, and we would give them an opportunity to start a business so that they can take care of their families, right? And so I focused on raising money for Latin America. I loved that program.
Randy, do you mind if we dig a little bit into, so I was fascinated and also honored by you sharing your origin story. And thank you again for doing that in the way in which you did and your transparency there. So how would you say your lived experience has helped frame your career roadmap?
Yeah.
Right. So as you've made decisions about where to spend your time, where to invest your energy, the kind of work to dig into, how do you feel like that early life and lived experience has helped influence the career decisions that you've made?
Yeah. So it influenced my career, like those challenges, right? And that's just like me inside, like me, Randy, always looks for a good challenge, a good fight. And I always threw myself into very complex situations through my career, because like how it doesn't get any more complex than some of the things I just told you, right? So I would do that, and I would network. Network was key. Like in DC, if you didn't know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, you were dead in the water. And you had to network. So that was a skill you had to build to either, to move along in Washington or get out. Right. And I built some of that skill through my life in the military, through, our military life. But what happened was I realized that I wasn't going to survive in the nonprofit world. I was hungrier. I wanted something different, right? Like nonprofit is great, but nonprofit becomes nonprofit in your pocket is what I always say. That was the thing. Yep. And so I had to take the risk, and I started applying at corporations from there. I reached out to our former employer, Collin. It was the first place I applied to out of, I think, about 75 nonprofit and corporations. They called me back a week later, and I was there. I was here in Rhode Island 6 months later. So that became a different track. And what happened there was I was running nonprofit organizations. I was the executive director. I was the president. I was running these organizations. Now I was a manager of a program. And I realized, like, I have to take a huge step back, and I have to start from the beginning, and I have to learn a different track, a different way, different dynamics, right? The corporate environment. It's a complex place to navigate. I started to navigate that. Collin, you're familiar with the ERGs that we had. Right? When you and I left the company, we were at like 29,000 people. I started the ERG program when I got there. It was me, myself, and I trying to do vaccinations for Latinos around Providence. Right. That was, and then there we were with this huge organization, right? We launched the first LGBTQ organization, right? And so what I was doing was trying to find my place in a very complex organization.
Okay, Randy, can I interject? So I have two questions. So one is, so I had a conversation earlier this week with a mentee, and we were talking about experience. And one of the things I think your story highlights is, and I'm curious if you used this when you had the conversation with our former employer. Did you talk about your life experience? Basically, when they talk about, well, what's your perseverance or resilience look like? Or, how do I know that, how dogged are you about pursuing getting to an outcome? You might say, here's these nonprofit things I've done, but honestly, I didn't know some of your origin story. But when you can talk to, hey, here's things I've already overcome, and here's where
I've been winning at life.
I've been overcoming life, and that's not. Unfortunately, it's not unique when it comes to a lot of minority professionals, because there are these hurdles from a poverty standpoint. There's hurdles from blocked access and things like that. Did you leverage that when you had the conversation, even just in the interview, or did you more leverage it just in a day-to-day? I know I have the grind in me. I know I have that dog in me to go after it and get it done.
So great question. And the answer is no. But that changed through time. I will tell you that I was embarrassed to tell people about the grind. I was embarrassed to share those stories. I never shared it. I haven't talked about me having cancer to anyone until about 2 years ago. That's almost 30 years later. Because for me, it was like, hey, that's just part of life. I was raised like, you figure it out. That is like not an issue. Somebody says, oh, you're a survivor. I'm like, whoa, no. I'm not a survivor. That's just what happened. I got through it. Right. So I never shared these things with anybody at work. I am starting to share that as of the last year and a half. Because I think I'm at a point in my life now, 53, I'm the chief equity officer at an iconic brand. I work with amazing people, and I'm very good and comfortable in my skin and with who I am. And the story is an exciting one. It's a journey to be able to get here, but it was a hustle. It was a huge hustle. It was a complex and stressful hustle. But I never shared those things. I was even embarrassed to tell people that I used the Hispanic Scholarship Fund to get some money to get to the community college. I could never tell anybody that. Today, I'm like, leverage the resources, find it, because once you get there and you break through that, man, the sky's the limit.
100%. And the other side of the question was the nonprofit for-profit piece, right? So I've worked with nonprofits as a board member, or, if someone just says, hey, can you help us think about an issue, right? But I haven't worked for a nonprofit. So my view of it is nonprofits are mostly made up of folks who are super passionate about the cause, and just, it's not about the money, right? It's about, how do we get this done? How do we do this meaningful thing? And for profit, sometimes you can get that, right? But a lot of times it's folks who are just motivated to be successful. So yes, good gets done, but really the motivation was success, right? Which also causes trauma and people getting trampled, and people getting left, like, damage left in your wake. Is that your experience? And how do you encourage folks to kind of break that mold from a for-profit and kind of use a nonprofit mentality, but in a for-profit space?
That's a super question. Let me put it in a nutshell here. When you do nonprofit work, it's a passion. You do it for passion. You're not doing it for money. If you're doing nonprofit for money, you're like, no. What I did early on in my life. Let me go back here. Let me put some chronology to this. I wanted to change the world because I knew that I got out of LA. I was able to see the country and get the money that I needed to go to college. I was lucky. I was the only one in my entire family on all sides to be able to do that. So I thought, hey, I want to do that for other people. So I went into the nonprofit world. Yeah. And I wanted to change the world. And then you realize that, I would report to board members who were board members from big companies. They would put thousands of dollars into, hey, person from PepsiCo, we need to close the gap on this finance issue. And he could write a check to me for 10, 15, 20 grand, right? I'm like, I'm HR. I barely make any money. I'm trying to do this. I'm firing and hiring. I'm finance, all the above. This is exhausting, and I'm not making change. And every time I go to a board meeting, they want to do something completely different. This is just BS. I can't, this isn't the change I want to make. So I go to the corporation, and I go into community relations. Then I end up doing diversity at our former employer. I had the money then. I ran the budget to then set dollars aside and make a difference in the organizations I wanted to.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm still doing what I always wanted to do, just just here on this platform. I'm still doing what I set out to do in my life, and that was to make a difference. And that hasn't changed.
I love that, Randy. And that was a great question, Collin, because Randy and I were on a quick prep call earlier this week, and we were talking about exactly that, because we both found ourselves in the social impact space. And while we've known each other for like 18 years, and we were both focused on lifting community, helping and linking arms with other local community partners to just transform lives and families and do good, the opportunity to leverage social impact and human impact work as a business lever and a business driver, is a game changer. So I echo that, Randy, and I think there's an appreciation that large corporations have for talent that not only has the lived experience and the cultural fluency, but also has the business acumen and the heart for human impact work. So those three things I think are key and continue to be keys to your success. And I wanted to follow up with a quick question again, because, you talked about your Latinidad, and Collin and I have often talked about leveraging cultural fluency as a competency. So at what point in your career, particularly when you stepped into a corporate environment, did you start feeling comfortable helping your employer cover their blind spots as perhaps they were developing national strategy on the Hispanic or Latino market? And those conversations were being driven by folks not of that community. So when did you start feeling comfortable lending not only your perspective, but your knowledge of, the psychology behind, the Latino market? I'm curious when you activated that superpower and started to leverage your cultural fluency as a competency.
All right. So our Collin and I's former employer is CVS Health, right? Let's just call it, because that's where it all happened, right? A couple of things happened there. For years, I've been pitching, we need to train our pharmacists to be fluent in Spanish because it's a growing marketplace, right? And for Latinos, for them, it's the pharmacist is literally their doctor, right? And so we worked on a program several years ago to build out Hispanic focused stores, and they're called CVS Pharmacy EMAS and more, right? You remember that, right, Collin?
Yep.
And so I had a lot of input into that strategy. It's like, all right, how do we take, what products do we sell in this particular store that would appeal to the Latino consumer in states like Texas, Southern Florida, Chicago, et cetera, right?
Right.
So we were able to get the product mix in place. And I was able to bring my experience, my understanding, and my insights into that strategy. Where we didn't have the wherewithal was in Hispanic pharmacists. And at the time, if you looked at the landscape of pharmacists, there were 15,000 Latino pharmacists against 600,000 pharmacists in the country at the time, which was like 3% of the pharmacist population. Mm-hmm. You've got Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, et cetera, right? And you're trying to now get the 15,000. So I'm like, we need to put a serious training program and get people to learn the basics of Spanish to communicate with a patient. The company wouldn't buy it. I worked with Rosetta Stone for years. They were pitching me every year for almost 5 years. And finally, I was able to invest $5,000 on a pilot that took 2 years. And I think you guys had David Casey on board on a couple of.
Shout out to David Casey.
So David, I reported to David, and David said, run with it. And the program became a huge training initiative for Spanish language across the organization. But what I will say about that is we all knew that this is something that you needed to do for good business, for business, period. But for some reason, our leaders couldn't wrap their head around that. And we were constantly pitching and showing data and all the above. Like, come on, like, what is it you don't get here?
Yeah.
Right? Invest in language learning. Let's get people trained and they'll appreciate it. We finally got there. And that's an example of just how, you know the importance of the language and the people you're communicating with and the impact it'll make on the business. And that's where you've got to figure out the differentiator or the fine line between business and passion, right? You can't beat people on the head to put a language program together. You have to constantly understand the business to make the business case for it. And that's where people can really get confused with things.
Yeah.
And if I could, sorry, Collin, just wanted to, and if I could add to that, yes, to everything you said, to the corporation or the entity, but I would also say to the individual and for our audience members who continue to stay connected to keeping it 100, what I would encourage all of you to do, which I've had to learn, because this wasn't me early on in my career, is don't sit on your skills, right? If you've got these superpowers and you recognize that your perspective and your voice and your lived experience is needed, in these conversations, and you're covering blind spots, don't sit on your skills. Do not sit on this cultural fluency. Make sure that you are letting your leadership know, like, hey, I want to be a part of that conversation. I'm a valuable team member. I've got, this tremendous knowledge base, and I want to support however I can and help influence and inform the strategy that you're creating. So I'd also put a little bit of the onus on us, on the professionals, right? And I know that has something to do with our scarcity mindset and our imposter syndrome that Collin and I often talked about. But you bring up some great points. We can't just wait for folks to pull us into those conversations.
Not only that, and I think the other thing I take from it is, so data. Like, I know you talked about the data, and data is so important, right? But a lot of times, they can go and grab the data from the big, management consulting firms or these other firms who are coming and pitching it for a certain reason. But none of those firms have the cultural context. So let's just use a very broad example, not specific to the former employer, but we all went through the pandemic, and we know in particular, a lot of minority communities just didn't trust these vaccines, right? And what caused the breakthrough? The breakthrough was when you started going into the community and say, all right, I need to talk to that pastor. I need to go talk to that community organization. And if they vouch, then these folks will more likely take the vaccine. When you started using cultural, contextual stories within the data, that's the breakthrough, because you know what? That management consulting firm doesn't know nothing about that product that's popping, because that's not what they're trailing that 6 months. They don't see it until it gets big data of sales. Know it because every cousin, every niece wants you to buy that and send that back home. I know in Jamaica, they know the sneakers before I do that. Oh, no. We don't want no New Balance. We want this, right? And so it's always the cultural context is a big differentiator for us, and we know it before others do. So Randy, there's a question up there that's for you, and it said, did the pilot get scaled beyond, let's call it, what you were looking for it to do and beyond what you expected it to be able to deliver?
After a couple of years of piloting it, there was a great guy on my team who negotiated with benefits, right? The people that would provide our scholarship or school funding, and they decided that, hey, we want to go ahead and support this. And then we ended up working with a university. So they took it on and then built the whole program. But that's the work that I was lucky to do. And I get to do that at Pizza Hut. It's like, hey, let's test this. Let's see if it works. And if it does, then let me give it to the right organization and let the organization own it, right? That's my job, is to go in and bring that cultural mindset, the business mindset, test it, and then work to identify who's going to own this and run with it and grow it, etc. You know? So,
thanks for the question, Anna. And Randy, just a quick follow-up. So I'm curious, what other muscles have you flexed that have supported your career mobility? Right. So we know that the lived experience was key. We know sort of that grit and resilience, and shout out to Ramon. I've had the pleasure of working with Randy's dad. And thank you for sharing the story about your mom. So in addition to those muscles you'd already been flexing because you were winning at life at a young age, what other muscles have you needed to flex, throughout your career once you got into the world of work that's helped with that upward mobility?
I will tell you, it's not a muscle, it's empathy. Look, man, I can't, single mom, LA, not speaking English, cancer, a ripped up family, all the above, man. I remember I went to do some work at one of our call centers for our specialty pharmacies calling in Pittsburgh. And this woman approaches me, pulled me aside, said, look, I'm a single mom. My son is getting bullied, and he gets out of school at 2:00 every day. And I can't think from that moment on until he calls me. I just want to make sure that he's okay. And she goes, but my boss keeps giving me a hard time about getting here late because I take my son to school, right? So there were those things, that dynamics, and I got it. I understood that. And I approached her boss and I said, hey, you can get more out of her in terms of performance if you think about her, like her day differently. So and we talked through that. They allowed her to come in 30 minutes later. They allowed her to leave for that time to make sure her son was okay so she could be there. And it like changed her performance, right? She was like really able to organize her day. I tell you that story because it's empathy. Man, I get it. If I didn't get that, if I couldn't put myself in somebody's shoes, right? That was my mom. That was my mom, right? And I'm thinking about, right? If I can't put myself there, I can't provide the guidance or recommendations. And so that's been the muscle that I've used. I put myself in people's shoes. I just can relate to the people that are trying to work their way up. I love my job right now. Like, I'm chief equity officer. I'm chief nothing. I'm like chief. Like, I love going there and hanging out with the people that, that make Pizza Hut, the people, you know what I'm saying? It's not, I'm not trying to pretend that I'm this, like, great. I've been there. That's my muscle.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Like, keeping grounded. And the reality is, look, you can be really smart, you can be really driven, and just forget that there's human beings, right, that you need to rely on to be successful. And I see so many stories like that anywhere, like leaders think, well, why don't they want to work hard? That's laziness. Well, everything is not about work, right? Most things are about life. And if you can figure out a way to show someone that care, that love in their life, you will get so much more productivity because they can lock in at work. So, we asked David this question, so I'm going to ask you. So if you had to say what's your top 3 like nuggets of wisdom for, that shape the Randy brand right now, what would they be?
one, right? Be empathetic. Like empathy is my thing. I look at where I am today in my career. I am so comfortable in my skin. I'm telling you, for the first time in my life, I'm so comfortable with my life. And so, being real is the second thing, right? Empathetic and being real. And the third thing is learning. Man, I couldn't read a book for my life because I didn't speak English. My dad, my dad, Adriana, right? So my dad taught philosophy at the Air Force Academy. My dad's a super smart guy.
Well, he taught philosophy to everywhere, right?
That dude was Socrates on Providence Corner, right? And he would make me read books on like the Iliad and just Plato's The Republic. At age 11, I'm like, dude, I don't understand any of this, right? I hated reading. I love reading today. I read biographies. I immerse myself in other people's lives in the past. So reading is key. Knowledge, gaining knowledge, understanding what everyone else thinks, how we all communicate is key. So it's learning, empathy, and what's the third thing I said there?
Curiosity. Stay curious.
Seriously. And those, and there's so many other things, that educate, empower, and uplift. Raquel, yeah, we've got a strategy at Pizza Hut called educate, equip, and empower. And if David Casey's on the line, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, but yes, those are the three things.
Awesome. Yeah.
No, thanks. So Randy, what's next for you, right? I know you're just settling in. So folks at Pizza Hut, calm down.
Yeah, we're not trying to get them out of here.
We're trying to get them out. But just, again, because many of the folks that join us, while some of them are early career and emerging leaders, you also have some mid-managers, and you also have some folks who are a bit seasoned in their career, right? And so I want to continue to stress the fact that just because you have X amount of years or decades in the game and you made some moves, it doesn't stop, right? It's all based on your personal decision and where you are in life and whatever that means for you. But for someone like you, what does that look like for you? As you continue to stay curious, as you continue to learn, you continue to build your national brand and your national network. Where's Randy 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, I hope that I'm still at Pizza Hut because I got to tell you, I'm having fun. For the first time, I love the work that we did at CVS. Like David and I and the team, we built an amazing program, right, Collin? 13 years.
100%.
It was, wow. And now I get to lead that function at an iconic brand, and I'm moving into doing this work on a global scale. And so I'm going to learn. It's a learning curve for me. I'm still learning, guys. You're always going to be learning. I tell my daughter, she'll do her homework in bed. And I'm like, you know what? Start breaking out of some of these habits. You're always going to have homework. Homework will never go away if you want to, get to a certain level and be influential. It's not about, for me, it's not about money. It's not about, that. It's about influencing the people that are coming, that are following behind, right? That are how can I influence you to be the best person that you can? And so that's what I'm excited about in life, because I'm finally comfortable with everything and where I am, and things, while the responsibilities are bigger, it's easier. I know how to manage that. And so from here, I'm today, thank you for the invite. And I get to say these things and talk to people and say, guys, work hard and you're going to get to a point where it's just fun, easy. and you get to do things like this with your good friends, right? And we've had a relationship, right? Think about it.
Yeah.
We have a track record together. You guys didn't just call me and say, hey, Randy Martinez from Pizza. We've known each other. This is what it's about.
Yeah.
And so that's what what I want the rest of my career to be, building these great relationships. What I love about Pizza Hut is it's relationship building. It's getting to know people. When I got there, people would be like, tell Randy, we'd like to have you come and talk to us. And I'd be like, yep, I was at CVS. I did this. I've got these things back here. And then I realized quickly, that's not what people want to know. People want to know about my dogs. People want to know about me, like what makes me tick, and when you start doing that, they invite you to places. And when they invite you to places, you get to talk about fun things and you build relationships. And that's how together we make things move forward.
No, I agree. Look, as I done better in my career, all I can think about is how do I help that next 20, 50, 100 people, give some of that knowledge that I didn't have coming out, share that so they can come through, because it actually feels even better than that next promotion right now. Because look, it's like you accomplish things and you feel great about them. And then you start saying, all right, I'm not like this narcissistic person. I don't need to be, applauded all the time. I would rather help and leave a legacy of how did I build a whole community of folks who are successful, even more successful than me. So I think that if that's the aspiration of a lot of folks, then we as humankind will be much better off, because like Adriano always says, no gatekeeping. And I think that folks sometimes feel like they got to die with that, intellectual property that got them to the CEO level. And it's like, why not create 100 more CEOs? Right?
I love it. And that's exactly why Collin and I are here. Folks know our origin story. And every once in a while, we remind folks and we tell them, like, it just happened randomly. I had an opportunity to connect with Collin on a virtual call. I love the flavor and the perspective he added to the conversation. And I just inserted myself and I sent him a private message, and I was like, dude, who are you? Like, I need more of that in my life. Like, I need to know more about you. Getting back to your point, Randy, where I've always said, and again, this is just recently that I've learned this, your likability factor is so important. So you can be super talented and just an amazing contributor, but if folks don't know you and it feels transactional, it's not going to connect with hearts and minds, right? But if you lead with kindness, but you also sprinkle information about your personal life, where you want to share pieces of yourself with your team so that they understand why you're moving the way you're moving. And recently I started implementing this, where some of the meetings that I've been leading, before we get into business, let's just do a check-in. How are you today, folks, between 1 and 10, right? Like, hey, everyone, let me start. I'm feeling like a 3 today, and this is why. Right? I'm not always a 10. Don't let this kind of fool you. It's not always there. But Randy, I so appreciate you bringing that up.
It's so funny you say that about the number. My daughter, if she were here, she'd laugh. In the morning when I would take her to school, she drives now as of like last month. She'd wake up and I'm excited in the morning, like, come on, like, Sarah, da. And she would just be quiet. I'm like, all right, let's start figuring this out. Are you a 1 to 5, 5 being the best? How are you today? And she would say to me, I'm a 2. I'm like, why? She's like, Dad, I'm a 2. All right, leave it alone. 3, good night. 4, wow, like, so she got great news last night, right? So yeah, I always check in. That's funny you say that. Look, I want to say one last thing. I'll leave it with this. The way I heard this quote so many years ago, and I live by this, literally. The greatest risk you can take is not, the greatest risk of all is not taking one. And you'll never know what your potential is and what you bring to the table if you don't take that risk. Say something, do something, be something, push something, influence something. do something.
I love it. Mic drop, mic drop, and another mic drop.
Yep.
No, this was absolutely amazing. And again, Randy, thank you so much for honoring us and just being so generous with your time and joining us today and sharing with our community and being accessible and available to our community of flavorful professionals who are still trying to decode the workplace, who are trying to figure out how to transfer their skills, into different spaces. So we can't thank you enough for being a special guest of Keeping It 100 Career Conversations. I know Collin's got someplace to be in a little bit, so we're going to wrap it up soon. But before we do, folks, just wanted to let you know that both Collin and I are going on vacation. Your girl is headed to Europe next week. And then shortly thereafter, Collin is also going on vacation. So what that means for us is we're going to be on hiatus for August, but we're going to come back even stronger and get the party started to kick off the fall. So stay tuned and don't go far. What do you say,
I'm
Collin?
going to St. Lucia. Listen, I'm gonna be dancing. I'm gonna have them play Dreams and Nightmares in the Caribbean like I did last year. It might be only me on the dance floor knowing the words, but me and Meek Mill go do it up. And so right now headed to my wife's party that we're throwing, and I'm gonna get my dance on in two-step. Randy, I'm gonna holler at you when I get back. I'm going, from St. Lucia. We'll find some brown fluids that have a little fire to them to sip on.
And I'm crashing the party. You can't
you come through. You come through.
I am so coming through. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We got the Hounds, we got Raquel, we got Anna, we got, Dr. Nicole, all this goodness. We got some new folks joining us today. So everyone, thanks so much.
Shout out to Dr. Janet Ray calling in from Cayman Islands. I know you're not from there, but you there sipping on something strong, I'm sure, and listening to us. That's love. That's love.
I know, that's right. She was going on vacation. It's all about the mental health is real, folks. Vacations will support that. Again, thank you all very much. Stay close and stay tuned. We'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks, Randy. Thanks for joining, friends. And don't forget to like, share, and hit that notification. See you next time on Keeping It 100.